So, good evening. Good evening. God bless everyone. So happy to see that you're here. Looking for a thumbs up from my friends out there in Zoom land. If you can see my screen. Excellent. Wonderful. All right. Well, I am Minister Cole Terrence Randolph Williams. So grateful that you're able to join us on tonight. You have reached Destination Station, the Columbia Project. We are here every Tuesday night, 7:30. If you're able to come into the room, the Zoom room, you can see the login information right there. We just jump on a little bit early so we can fellowship with one another, love on each other, and transition over into the live. Now, on Sundays, we're not in Zoom, but certainly we're still here on the Columbia Project, our YouTube channel. So you'll find us not only on YouTube, but also on the live, which is Facebook. We ask that you like, subscribe, and share. Share the gift of love. Let someone know that God is love, and love truly is for everyone. Point blank, period. All right, so those are our channels. And if you happen to be in the Maryland area, come on out and check on us. Come see us. We would love to love on you in person. So here we are right there at 120 Allegheny Avenue. All right. So tonight we are taking a look at the scripture that's going to come from the book of Matthew. And we're looking at chapter 13, verses 31 through 33 technically are the scriptures. I think I threw in 34 and 35, but I just put that in parentheses because it is one that I wanted to reference on tonight. And then we have 44 through 52. And quite simply put, our theme for this month, happy August 1st, from what I understand, it's Leo season, okay, that we are growing in spirit. So this speaks to me as I did some studying for myself in this particular text. So that's how I feel in terms of our theme, is that we can see ourselves growing in spirit. So yeah, pull up your text, your actual old school Bible, the actual hard copy, or go on your phone, whatever versions that you have. I just invite you to join with me. I'm going to be sharing with you my screen. The text here is coming from the Inclusive Bible. And then some things here you can already tell that I've gotten kind of highlighted. That's because I'm going to be talking offline as well as online, meaning the notes that I've put together to speak towards the text. All right, so let me just read through it. First and foremost, we've got verses 31 through 32. All right, and so these are parables. It is Jesus who is presenting, speaking to the crowd, the multitude, folks who are present in the area. And Jesus presents another parable, as it says, to the crowds. And he says, the kingdom, some versions may say kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is like the grain. Well, this is me putting parentheses where it says grain of a mustard seed, but the inclusive text just says like the mustard seed, which a farmer sowed. I put in there, it says farmer took and sowed. Again, that's coming from another version. So to have it read where you can get the idea, the illustration, speak to you personally, I added those in there. So let me just read that once more. The kingdom of heaven is like the grain of a mustard seed, which a farmer took and sowed in a field, in this field. And it is the smallest of seeds, but when it has grown, it is the biggest shrub of it all. I also saw it said the biggest herb of them all. And it becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come to perch in its branches. All right. Next, we have verse 33. It says, and Jesus offered them still another parable. So we are doing is just, looking at the parables that Jesus is giving us. And it says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like the yeast, or it also said the leaven that a baker took and mixed with 3 measures of flour until it was leavened all through. Next segment of text is coming from 13:44 through 46. Excuse me. And it says, the kingdom of heaven is like a buried treasure, I also saw it's a hidden treasure. So those words, however it sits with you, that's totally okay. So the kingdom of heaven is like a hidden treasure that was found in a field. The ones who discovered it hid it again and rejoiced. Another version said had joy at the discovery and went and sold all of their possessions and bought that field. 45, or again, but wait, there's more. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant's search for fine pearls. And when one pearl of great value was found, the merchant went back and sold everything else and bought it. Right? And so then here in 47, 48, I'm packing another parable. It says, or again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collected all kinds of fish. And when it was full, the fishers hauled it ashore. Then sitting down, they collected the good ones in a basket and threw away those that were of no use. 49 through 50, this is how it will be at the end of time. Now, I'm gonna be transparent. I was like, I'm gonna exit this particular passage. You'll maybe see why. I'm not a fan of some things that sounds aggressive in this tone, but nonetheless, we will continue. This is how it will be at the end of time. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the just and throw the wicked into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Last two. Have you understood all this? Yes, the crowd that was being spoken to answered. And to this, Jesus replied, every religious scholar who has become a student of truth, I inserted, the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household who can bring from the storeroom, excuse me, I got that covered on my end, bring from the storeroom both the new and the old. So that's our text in a nutshell. Welcome, One Love. Good to see you. Just wanted to give you a quick shout out. Grateful you're here with us. All right. So we're going to talk about it. And I encourage you to, pull out your notebooks or, jot down any notes, things like this. Last but not least is verse 34, 35. I wanted to add in here because it's not necessarily part of that text that came from the lectionary, but it's part of the whole, right, in this chapter, in that section. So from 33, I'm putting in 34, 35. And so it just says here that Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables, right? And he spoke to them in parables only. That's his method. And it was to fulfill what had been said through the prophet. And he says, I will open my mouth in parables. I will announce things hidden since the creation of the world. All right, so before I get started with some things that I found, which were interesting to break down, does anybody have anything they want to add, any questions, things of that nature before we talk about it? I like using that visual there. No? Okay. All right, so this is where I'm going to be doing, like I said, mix between, some notes that I have offline and just allowing us to see the text again. So feel free to jump in if you have any questions or comments. All right, so first off, let's look at it where I have it highlighted there, parable. Okay, so first off, another thing I want to mention is that our minister Gladys did an awesome job for preaching or speaking to us the first time in the pulpit on Sunday. So I'm giving her flowers. And she, gave us a definition as well, from what I recall. And so a lot of this information that I'm going to be unpacking with you tonight, is going to have a metaphysical lens to it, but it's also going to be hopefully just as, plain and broken down English as possible. But, metaphysically, it's nothing to me that should be, far-fetched for me to also grasp. But very straight to the point, the parable is a symbolic story, right? That's told to illustrate truth. Now, truth can be, I guess subjective depending upon who's saying what truth is. But in this sense, again, that's why I preface it with the definitions that I'm providing. are from a metaphysical lens, right? So truth is referred to as the absolute. Excuse me. And what that means is that it's the absolute that aligns with God. So, you know, if you're ever familiar with people not just saying God as God, you may have heard, God or being referred to as higher power, divine mind, universal intelligence, right? So that's allowing us to have a higher lens or a different lens in the way that we can even address that word God, right? But the idea is that it is the absolute. Truth is the absolute that's in alignment with those terms, right? How higher power may show up and whatever that may represent for you at home, that's totally okay. And so it is the idea that it is as it is the point. And so a term also known as divine principle, right? So when we look at divine principle, there's some things that are considered to be, universal truths. So you have this idea known as a universal law, just as you have a spiritual law, right? And so maybe a universal law, as an example, could be the law of gravity, right? Like, it's something that you may not be able to see, but nobody really, you know, kind of debates gravity, right? It is what it is. Um, a spiritual law, I would say, is that, how we say God is love, the essence of who God is love. Okay. So we look at that as being then a fundamental truth, right? Um, I think 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, a person who could be a truth seeker, they would say in their interpretation or their idea of a higher being, a higher power, they would equate that to being God is love, right? It's a source that is considered to be powerful, that is beneficial, it's positive, it's for them. I'm gonna say 9 times out of 10. All right. So now in this fundamental truth, what we find is that there is a divine expression, right? And so that's what the parable is. The parable is a divine expression of truth, right? It's basically where we could see that, if I said there's a fundamental truth, there's something that's absolute, there's something that, people usually don't debate. Um, you can look at the concept of, the universe, right? The universe is something that's so vast, as we, have learned through grade school, or whenever, we care to take interest in science, right? It's something that has all these moving parts. It just exists, right? It's something that we as humans didn't have any say in and didn't have any contribution towards as far as creation, right? So that in itself, it works in perfect harmony. It's something that is labeled as divine. It's an expression of something that's greater, and in that greatness, we also attach that to the idea of the absolute, which is truth. And again, like I said, we're tying that into this divine presence known as God. Okay, so I hope we're okay with that. So now when Jesus is sharing this symbolic story to illustrate truth, Jesus is doing his job as expressing the divine expression, right? The illustration of what is, okay? And so I wanted us to be able to take this and make it personal to us, to where, although these are parables that may seem like, I don't know if you can or you can't relate, but that's the goal, is that we could apply it to ourselves and see that we can take the lessons that Jesus is illustrating for us in these parables as us in the story. So let me just try to, move us there. So first, what I like is we've got, terms that are being used, like, even from last week, right, where Deacon Paulette did a phenomenal job in teaching us about the tares and the wheat, right? And before that, we were hearing about, or we had other stories talking about sowing and seed. And I believe that we've been introduced to this understanding that, during the time that Jesus is talking to the crowd is familiar with these terms based off of the economy, of, what the occupations were, people, overall agriculture, right? People work, farmers, they understood the understanding of sowing seed, or, a farmer, being present in the story. They understood, when he's using terms like field and things like that. So again, it's for us to relate in a way that if a story is related to the people at that time, we want to see that we can have the story relate to us in this time. So this is where I'm pulling us towards. Okay, so we've got here in reference to, let's see. Okay, so one thing I wanted to bring up was in the book of Mark, um, particularly Mark chapter 4, verse 2, Jesus taught it in the scripture there says, Jesus taught them many things in this form of parables, right? And in the course of his teaching, he said, listen carefully. So this is the idea, right? The idea is that, sometimes you got to take your mind away from just the words as you see it, like straight on the page. We want to be able to open up our divine mind and allow that interpretation to come to us from this divine source, right? This divine expression. Okay. And so I believe that when Jesus is saying, listen carefully, yeah, it's listen to, tone, context, things of that nature, but even more so, listen to maybe something that can be offered to us in a different level of consciousness. That's where I'm trying to help us see this from that metaphysical lens. Okay. So now when we look at words like seed and field, seed, for instance, in the metaphysical represents the creative idea. Okay. So the creative idea is inherent in the word, right? Meaning its very nature is inherited from its parent source, which is God. So I'm trying to, help us connect the dots here, right? Because the seed, right, the inherent idea, the creative idea is in essence the word, right? It's directly connected to its source, which is God. And if we're looking at ourselves, this is what I'm trying to introduce to us, is that we could be looking at ourselves as the seed. The seed being that we were made in the image of God, and we were made out of the image of God through God's spoken word, right? That spoken word in itself is the creative idea. So the definition of the seed in the metaphysical is the creative idea. We are the creative idea. We are the creative idea that was spoken, and from that spoken word, we were made, right? Made in the image of God. And so even in that text, I've said this so many times, but I think it just still sits with me how beautiful God fashioned us and thought about us. And that just puts me in a space of gratitude. Whereas it says, we were known before we were formed in the womb, right? So if we're looking at, how we understand a mustard seed, which is super, super small, right? And so Jesus is helping us put this in the frame that it says it's the smallest seed, but it has grown, the biggest of a shrub, and then it becomes a tree. Well, first, let's go to the idea. The creative idea is just the smallest thing, right? It's the smallest thing in thought. It hasn't even formed into anything yet. And it's God is saying, I know you, I knew you, before you were formed, right? That just had me like really appreciate that I was thought of in the mind of God before I was the fetus, before I was the baby, before I, became an adult, right? And also to push us in the aspect of the womb is not separate from the creative idea. So, that event, if you will, being placed in the womb, yeah, that has happened, but it's not separate from the source because the source being God created the womb. You understand? So it's
Amen.
all together.
Amen.
And it's all beautiful in that way. So let's look at the part where it's talking about the field, right? So the field here in a metaphysical term is, I thought it was interesting because first thing it said was outside the house of God. This term field, the word field is outside the house of God. And then I was like, kind of just questioning that because I'm like, I can't picture God in the word house, right? Because we understand God is everywhere present, always, right? There's, you think of house, you think of a structure, something that's, containing something, right? And so I'm like, God, I don't connect with that when you're saying outside of, right? So it says outside the house of God. So I want to look at the word house, and house in this same, kind of like underneath the definition of field under outside the house of God, it said, house is what God builds and dwells in the body of humankind, right? And so what that allowed me to do is look at it that as far as God and house, House is God building and dwelling God's self in our body, right? So, you've heard of the term, God dwelling in us, or you've heard of that terminology, that phrase, those statements, right?
Yeah.
And you may even heard people say body temple, right? That's where I believe this also is connected with, because as we look at, having our minds and our ideas or our thoughts, our consciousness to be, looked after, it's also just as important for our bodies to be looked after. And it's not in this superficial kind of way that it's more like, oh, I want to, look good, take care of myself. Yeah, you want to take care of yourself physically. But if we switch our consciousness to understand that it's, the house of God, meaning it's actual God's being and presence as the dwelling place of where God is in our body, as our body, I think that gives us some power, right? And I feel like that's where people may come in to that mindset of, wanting to honor their body temple, wanting to honor the understanding that the body is where God dwells. Okay. So I didn't want you to I guess feel like that is something that's, not as important, because it could be important to you. It's allowed to be important to you, that yes, from a physical sense, um, you know, very like materialistic and a natural, kind of mindset, that yeah, we want to take care of our body for many reasons. But my goodness, if we now connect this word field, and we look at field as being the house where, God dwells, as far as the body temple, it gives us a different perspective, I think. So let's kind of reverse engineer this, right? Because we understand that the seed, okay, the seed represents us, okay? Now the field is the body temple. So Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, the seed, us, which the farmer took, we've been taken, we take and we sow ourselves, we sow into ourselves, we sow into our body temple. Okay. Now, here, the reason why I wanted to also bring that in is because back into the definition of field, where it says outside the house of God, the word field, particularly I put in there where it says this field, right? Because that's how I read in another interpretation, right? And it says a field in the inclusive, but it says this field. So that's where the outside piece comes in at. And what Matthew does is in verse 38, I'm sorry I don't have it here for you, but if you care to look at it, in verse 38, it simply says, the field is the world. Okay? The field is the world. So now look at us being the seed, and what are we doing? We are sowing ourselves where? In the world. Do we not live in the world? Okay. And what is important for us as we live in the world, as we sow ourselves in the world, is to recognize that we are the God body, right? The God body, God dwelling in us in the world, okay? And us recognizing ourselves as the seed, as God knew us before we were even formed, all to me this conveys is that we had purpose. We were created with purpose. Our purpose was to be from an idea. Remember, seed is creative idea, to being in the womb, which is not separate from source, right? Being formed in that. And then to be able to grow, as this says, we grow into, the biggest shrub of them all, but we come to our fulfillment, right? I'm not talking literal sense of, somebody's tall or short or anything like that, but we grow, right? We become, into fulfillment of a human being. Okay, let's keep that simple. And so in that, right, our purpose is to do that, right? God has a purpose for us, right? It's not to just take up space and be a human for the sake of being a human, but to recognize our Godness, our God body, right? The body that God dwells in, right? And then we're looking at to become something, right? I believe that's the intentionality. Now, I know we just in verse 31 and 32, but I thought this thing was deep. Okay, because the intentionality is to become something, to become a tree. So walk with me on this, because what the tree does, the tree serves a purpose for, what it say, the birds of the air to come and perch in its branches. So now we get to say, okay, so our seed is not just for the sake of it to be sown, but yeah, we are being sown into this world, okay? But it's also for us to have purpose where others can come about and partake, right? Others can come and be able to enjoy our purpose, right? And so I thought that that was pretty powerful. Now, from a metaphysical perspective, the tree represents, I thought this was really neat, represents nerves. So stay with me here because it says it represents nerves. And as we understand, just in, if you could just be like on the elementary scale of science, right? Our nerves are the connection of the whole organism. Okay, the nerves is very important to us, and so like if somebody says, you know, I'm experiencing nerve damage, nobody is never going to say, oh, just get over it. You know what I mean? Because it's a big deal. It's a very important major component of how we live, how the body is able to function. And so the nerves are an expression of thought. Okay, it connects again the entire organism through what is called nerve fluid. Okay, so this is where, oh my God, it's so beautiful to even see, you know, how science is just, you know, all connected, because there's nothing separate from, like I was saying earlier, the divine mind, right? Nerve fluid is what is known as spiritual fluid, right? So what spiritual fluid is that electromagnetic energy that is flowing through body, right? So not only are we flesh and blood, we are also spirit. How many times did somebody say, spirit dropped in my, something dropped in my spirit, or something told me, right? That's a very real, tangible thing. It's a very real expression is what I'm saying. And when we talk about the nerve fluid being the spiritual fluid, and it's saying it's the electromagnetic aspect of it in terms of movement, we know that there's science that proves that there's that we are electric beings, right? We have electricity, we create electricity, right? And not only that, it's been measured that, you know, overall, you know, broken down as far as atoms, right? Energy, all of that can be measured and tested that we have the ability to impact our environment. Amen. So going back to you as the God body, look how powerful you are, right? You have the ability to create and affect your environment because you are the creative idea. You are the seed. And I wanted you to understand your purpose in the world, right? You are to be sown into this world. And though you may be small in stature, when I say small a seed, like I already kind of gave you a visual from birth, but look at small in knowledge, like whatever you do know, right? As you go to seek out your own truth, right? Because this is about illustration of truth. That's enough to make an impact in the world. And that's your purpose. So I needed you to understand your purpose. All right. And so the only other thing I wanted to attach to this term in terms of tree was what I found in Genesis 2:9, which it did talk about, you know, in the garden, it talked about the tree, and particularly with that, because it talked about in the center of the garden, yeah, right? In the center of the garden, look at us, the tree in the center, okay? The God body in the center. So in the center of the garden, it talked about there being everything good, right? And so that's what I also wanted us to embrace, right? When God created us, God created something good. We're not going to take on any ideas that we were imputed with sin, that we did wrong, that we was bad, and we got to, you know, make things, you know, right in that sense. This is what I didn't want to have us to take on. I wanted to see us from the beginning, that we were known, that we were thought of, and that we were in the center of it all, right? And that in that, it said that the tree was good. And it said from the soil that all things, you know, came from it that were good, right? So I wanted us to be able to connect with that. And it talked about from that soil that it produced what? The tree of life, and it produced the tree of knowledge, which in interpretations text said good and evil. So all I wanted us to do is to understand that when Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven is you. The kingdom of heaven is you being the seed here in this earth. No matter where you are in your truth, you matter. You have a purpose to share that truth, and that truth is for others, like the birds, to be able to partake and perch on your branches, and know that what you are good, right? And then it talks about the tree representing a nerve, and understanding that the nerve is the focal point of the whole, right? It's just as important. So I needed you to know your importance, right? And so, and understanding that you being a tree of life, tree of life is just that, right? Life is good. It produces life in terms of, knowledge. The tree of good and evil, that's what that is. So I believe that we are created in harmony, and that harmony is something that we should embody as we are the God body. So I hope we're okay with accepting that for ourselves. So that was my 2 cents there. All right, so let's move forward. If anybody has anything to add, touch on, feel free to speak up. Okay, so now we're in verse 33. So it's talking about the leavened bread. It says the yeast, but in the metaphysical, I couldn't find anything to attach to the yeast because it talks about the leaven. So with that being said, the leaven is another expression or illustration of truth. It says leaven is the truth, okay? So it talks about the word of truth here, particularly in that where the kingdom of heaven is like this leaven truth that the baker takes. Okay, so now, like I said, I wanted us to see ourselves in the text. So you be the baker, okay? So now you're going to take this truth, and what you're going to do is you're going to take that truth and you're going to mix it all up, all right? So mixing it up for yourself means that you're not quietly sitting by in terms of the knowledge that you obtain, the truth that you uphold as far as the principles, right? Your founding principles, okay? And that's where you're taking ownership of who you are and you're allowing yourself to grow, right? So you want to pay attention to that because it talked about the word of truth can seem like it's just hidden in your mind, but pay attention to what you speak and how you speak, right? That's the thing that springs up out of you that you're probably like, I didn't even know I had that in me, right? That's that truth that's inside of you that you've been able to mix inside, right, into your spirit. And that's a good thing, okay? And so that process continues until your whole consciousness overall is in alignment. Remember, we talked about in the beginning, I said that truth was the absolute, which is in alignment with God. Okay, so that's the goal, right? You are the baker. You're taking the truth. You're taking that truth and mixing it in so that it is leavened all throughout. And being leavened is just spreading that truth all throughout your consciousness where you're allowing yourself to develop. And I wanted you to see yourself in a space that you don't have to have a label. You don't have to be at a certain stature. Remember, I said, like, as far as a seed, you have these different phases that you are, but from the beginning, what has been created, you've been created, you are known and you are good. So you matter, your life matters, and I wanted you to be able to connect with that. All right. The next piece we're going to go into is then in the 44 and 46. And I apologize, I thought I had highlighted this, but basically we're looking at it from the perspective of talking about the treasure, right? The treasure being buried, found in the house. So because the reason why we said the house was the field, right? So the treasure was found in the field. And basically what that's saying again is that you have some treasure inside of you, right? Remember, the field is representing the temple of God, right? You are the God's body temple, God dwelling within. And so then there's treasure there. And the beauty of it is that you get to discover it, right? And so once you discover, look what's happening. You're rejoicing. You have joy. And looking up the terms of joy and rejoicing, joy and gladness are considered to be strength giving. So once you discover who you are and discovering that treasure that you have within, it's like a natural state that you will respond in a space of rejoicing. And I wanted you to understand that you having that is you giving strength. It's giving you strength and you giving strength. And especially in your mind, particularly where you start to fix your mind on things of the spirit, right? So these are some practices that you want to pay attention to for yourself, because this will bring you joy. It says joy is the happiness of God being expressed through us, right? So we are not out here alone. We are not disconnected from source. We are not disconnected from the divine. Jesus is expressing to us that, the kingdom of heaven is like us, finding the treasure within, finding that treasure of understanding that God is dwelling with us, is abiding within us, right? As us, right? And when we discover that, we rejoice in that. And that joy gives us strength. It's strength giving. and we are also giving strength, right? And so with that, we could see that it says that it is the happiness of God. God is happy with us. God is expressing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I like to smile when I think about the way I connect with God, being a creator who loves me, and then having expression of joy about me. Okay. And so you can maybe connect to the text that's pretty common, where people say, "The joy of the Lord is my strength." Right? The joy of the Lord is my strength. So wanted to affirm you in that. So then he goes on to say the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who searched for fine pearls, and one pearl of great value was found, and the merchant went back and sold everything. So all in all, it's basically, between treasure and great pearl. I wanted you to see yourself having worth, having value, having, being something so precious, right? And understanding that which is precious, your purpose, right, is already there, it's already inside you. And once you discover it and find it, and if you're, finding it, on a daily basis through your journey, or, any aha moments through nature, through, circumstances that pop up in your life, I promise you, like the merchant and like the one who is rejoicing, it basically says you give up anything and everything to obtain it, to keep it, to nurture it, right? So I wanted to just share that with you, that that's what that's about, and that you discover something of great value, that you are the discovery. And once you find that, then you come to a state in your life that you're like, I don't want anything else but this good thing that I found. Okay. So giving yourself that freedom, that liberty to do that, to understand your worth, to understand your purpose and your value. All right. So overall, when we're looking at the terminology of the kingdom of heaven is representing, you having this awareness, possessing, multiple states of consciousness within your mind, within your spirit. And, going back to just real quick, where the 11 piece, the three measures represent mind, spirit, and body. So you are all of those things, right? Spirit, soul, however, you want to put that, but you are mind, which is, you are the seed, you are the creative idea, you are the spirit, you are the electromagnetic, energy of God that's being propelled through you, that, the expression of God is the happiness of expression of God is being expressed through you, right? Not just for yourself, but also for another. And then your body, right? Your body being that sacred space where God dwells. As the body temple. So that's the three measures: your mind, your body, and your spirit. I thought that was pretty cool. And then here we have another parable, right? Another illustration, symbolic illustration, right? Of truth. So it's talking about the net being cast out into the sea and collecting all kinds of fish. And what this is saying, the net is representing the capacity. So this is for you to understand that you have the capacity. Okay. You are capable. You're more than capable. You're more than capable to adopt and to take on ideas and expressions of consciousness, allowing your mind to expand. And not only that, is talking about, when you come to a space of truth, awareness, of knowledge, or whatever, you're collecting all the information, you get to sift that out, right? So it's saying that which is good, you keep, you put it in the basket, right? It serves a purpose. Okay. That which is not good is not going to serve purpose, right? So if it's, things that no longer serve you, negative thinking, old patterns and behaviors and things, again, just, you get the point, things that no longer serve you, you throw that out. It's no longer of you. So I wanted to put that in its simplest form about this particular parable, is that the net is representing our mind, and our mind having the ability to cast out, right? And to cast out and to take in the thoughts and the ideas of a higher consciousness, and allowing ourselves to think, as people may say, good and bad, but whatever, right? Just the ability to sift through, right? And say, what is spirit saying? What is it that I'm looking to be in alignment with, that spirit is leading and guiding me, and that which is serving me is for my greater good. I'm going to keep, and I'm going to hold on to that, put that in my basket, if you will. And that which is not, I'm going to go ahead and throw that away. All right. And so, just in summary, overall, just making sure I'm bringing home some points. You know, at the end of the day, we've got the seed. You are the actual seed, right? You yourself are, created with a purpose, to develop, to expand, and to abide and have, the divine mind to abide in you, and vice versa. In terms of the leaven, right? You have this truth, this truth which it talks about. Leaven, usually when you understand leaven in correlation with bread, bread being substance and nourishment. So I wanted you to understand that you get to take on that truth. The baker takes that truth and makes it all up, right? And apply it and allow it to expand in your mind. Remember the three measures: your mind, your spirit, and your body. Okay. And then in reference to the field, in terms of the treasure, right? That treasure is hidden inside of you, which you get to discover, on a daily basis. That which is, already inside of you, in your mind, in your heart, all the things you contain the treasure, right? So I wanted you to attach your mind to your own identity in that way, and your spiritual identity, as we go to discover who we are, our true selves in the divine, right? Remember, our dwelling, God dwells in us as our body, as the body temple. And that pearl, that pearl also representing something great, of great value. So I wanted you to understand your worth, understand your value there, and that once you connect to that value, it is worthy and worth you giving up, everything, so that you can possess it, that you can recognize it, and nurture it and grow that, right? And so then we looked at the net, right? The net overall is, our mind having that capacity to do the work, right? Being able to gather in our thoughts, gather in information, and allowing spirit to help us, or, we ourselves, like I said, being God body. I just wanted us to see ourselves empowered, right? We have the tools already. We have the ability to sift through, right? And retain that which is useful, what is good, and discard what is not. Now, this piece, this is where I was saying, like, just reading it, I didn't automatically connect with it, but obviously I'm teaching, so I wanted us to not omit, and I wanted to share with us as far as what the perspective metaphysically is. So when it's talking about the end of time, and another interpretation says the end of the world, here it's more about, and the description in reference to, they called it the end of an age, right? So it's signifying the end of a mental process, if you will, right? So, in terms of, having an overall consciousness of always, having negative thoughts, error thoughts. It's no longer, like, I guess for me, what I identified it is with, no longer are people just sitting by and, like how they want to erase, certain populations, certain communities, right? For our trans siblings, our non-binary siblings, just overall people of color, right? Just, different groups, if you will. It's just, yeah, we understand that there are, definitely laws that are, being put in place, and, being petitioned, things like that. But at the same time, there's such resilience as well, that people aren't going quiet, off into the night, or being silent, if you will. So that's what it means in terms of there being a new age is coming, which I wanted us to allow ourselves to take hope in, and to grasp on that, because a lot of times we can be bombarded with, the negative news, if you will, or as people say, the fake news. And not saying that it doesn't have a place, or it may serve a purpose. I don't know where, but depending on who you are, some people don't even, look at the news, right? All I'm saying is that we can look at good thoughts, good ideas, and see the good that's happening in the world. And I have heard, like never before, right? People are connecting their overall universal consciousness with one another in prayer, right? In meditation, and seeing, as we pray for peace, world peace, seeing, people heal and whole. Like, that's a thing. That's a real tangible thing. So at the end of the day, there's basically saying that there's a separation of people who focus on the negative, the bad, and the people who say, you know what, that's not my truth. That's not what I'm going to focus on. I choose to, look at my purpose and what I'm here to do, so that I can be of good soil, good use for another, and have, become a tree, have purpose in this world. So we do that by the act of denial. And so that's where this terminology here, we see blazing of the furnace. Another interpretation was talking about, cast in fire. So when you're in the metaphysical sense, understanding fire and that being something that's something that's being consumed by fire, that's a form or an idea of denial, right? Denying in that, I'm destroying, the error thoughts. I'm cleansing my mind and my process, by denial. Like just as we affirm ourselves, that God is our strength, the joy of the Lord is our strength, we deny that, I don't know, trying to give an example, right? Just in the way it's like the opposite. In the way that we're looking at an affirmation, it is a practice to also deny and to cleanse our minds with the process of denial. That nope, I don't care what it looks like. I claim over my life. I speak with my words that I am sick. Excuse me, heck to the gnaw. I am healthy. Okay, I'm healthy. I'm whole. I'm healed. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I wanted to maybe help you see what that looks like, right? So I really hope that this is encouraging you to maybe take another perspective on the way that we look at these parables. And like I said, parables at the end of the day is this symbolic illustration of truth. And I hope that you caught that truth of who you are in the eyes of God. And so at the end of the day, when we look at the last two verses here, Jesus was like, you got that? Jesus says, do you understand all this? And the crowd says, yes, right? So I think sometimes it could be that we could get maybe a little fixed on the literal in a way that it's like, well, how could they have understand everything that I just said, right? But I think there is just like revelation and enlightenment. There were people in those crowds that understood, and as we are in this time of our age, as we apply it to our lives, that we are people who can understand as well. So Jesus is saying, every religious scholar who has become a student of truth, that's what's key. The text doesn't say truth, but like I said, the purpose of the parable is to illustrate truth, right? So when you become a student of truth, right, then you get to see. It's almost like you ask God to, take any type of veils off your eyes. Like really, you're not really trying to even read this thing with your physical eyes. You want to go inward to that inner eye, right? And so you're saying, let me be a student of truth of what the Spirit is saying. How is the Holy Spirit illuminating this for me, right? To see me in this text, right? And so talking about the head of household who can bring from the storeroom is that which is already there. So when you're becoming a student of truth, you're putting in you the foundational principles, the foundational truth. You're then going to be able to pull that out, right? To call on that which is already there. And when it's talking about both the new and the old, again, it's that work of you being able to sift through and hold on to that which is good, the harvest, from you being able to have the capacity to take in, right? And keep that into your mind, your basket, into your spirit, and discard what no longer serves you, right? So the new and the old, out with the old, in with the new, but knowing that you have the capacity to do it all. And that's the beauty of how God created us, right? Us being the tree of both tree of life and the tree of knowledge. So I want to say that should be about it. Just going back to the text of where I wanted to pull out what Jesus said in 34:35 that wasn't in the lectionary. Jesus says, look, I spoke all these things to the crowd in the parables, and that's how I speak, right? So I took that as it's for our benefit to do this work. It's for our benefit to go a little bit deeper, to look behind or look around and to ask for that illumination, to ask God to show us that which is already in us to be at a forefront, if that helps at all. And so that's what I believe Jesus did, is to help us see truth in a way that, yeah, he talked to people during the time that understood the circumstances of, like I said, the agriculture. They related to the terminology, the farmer, the seeds. We saw that pattern overall throughout Matthew, but at the same time, he's talking of a different dimension, different level. And so he's asking, do you get that? And he's like, yeah. And if you get that, it's because you're a student of it, right? So I wanted to encourage you of that. And then lastly, about the prophet. So, people have referred to Jesus as a prophet, right? I think we can all relate to that. And so I think Jesus is demonstrating that, not only referring to what has been said through the prophet, but owning that as well, in terms of saying, I will open my mouth in parables and I will announce things hidden since the creation of the world. And so the prophet, I think I had that, just wanted to bring it home with you there. 1 second, and make sure I could find it. Yeah. So the prophet, right, is the teacher. We relate to Jesus as being teacher. We've heard in text people referring to Jesus as master teacher, right? So embodying that space, the prophet is referred to as a teacher. The prophet receives inspiration of spirit, right? Understanding of spiritual law. They are imparted. They impart that to another. And they are in contact with spirit where they're able to reveal revelation, and to have and to get direction, to give direction from the Holy Spirit, to understand divine law and its workings, even giving warnings and instructions and other thoughts. So here's Jesus operating to me in that way. And again, I'm encouraging us to allow ourselves, give us permission to see ourselves as Jesus in this text as well, right? Because we too can be students and teachers. We can receive inspiration from spirit. We can understand the spiritual laws, the foundational principles. We can impart that to another as we are the seeds in the earth, right? And understanding our purpose, we can provide revelation and get direction as well from the Holy Spirit. We can understand these laws and the workings of it and provide instruction, warnings, things of that nature. So I never want us to see ourselves that was just for that time and those people. I wanted to bring us into the text that way, and hopefully you can feel empowered and inspired to do so. So that's really all that I have. Thank you for your time. I'm super grateful that I had the opportunity to share. Those of you who are watching us, please feel free to join us live, not only in person, but as we are here streaming on our YouTube channel. And certainly if you are feeling inclined to donate and to give, we would appreciate that, because it allows us to continue to do the great work that we are doing in our communities, locally, globally, as we're connected to the Unity Fellowship Church movement. But nonetheless, again, thank you for your time. And I would say, God bless you. Thank you for watching. I'm going to pass it over to Pastor just for time's sake. I know we normally do takeaways, but Pastor, I would like for you to go ahead and share anything you have to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I do want to know if anyone has a takeaway, maybe even just one thing that you're taking home from tonight's class.
One of the things that Minister Cole said, it's a verse that I often use all the time.
Mhm.
And that is, before I was formed in the womb, God knew me.
Mhm.
And I loved how you weave that text into your presentation to help take us back, so that we stay in remembrance of the fact that we are seeds that are planted here. And that we have a specific function and a specific level of growth that we are supposed to incur during this lifespan.
Mhm.
And it's not just for us. We're not here just for us. We're here for others, because seeds bring life, and then or bring forth whatever other fruit or flowers, and then other people and other animals live and thrive off of that. So I appreciate that input, that intake.
Thank you. Yes, Minister Paulette. Deacon Paulette.
Yes, great lesson, brother. What came to me as you were unraveling all of these parables, back to Genesis, and all the creation that was done in those 6 days, the Lord referenced, and it was good. And despite how we present, despite how we come, despite how we're being used, if we're seeking the light and such, we can too embrace the fact that and it is good. And it is good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen. Amen.
Trustee Marlene? Mhm.
Well, a couple of things. One is the real simple, kind of obvious, but I don't know why it didn't seem so like it was so obvious to me tonight, but the idea that the trees were made for birds to have a home. It's so obvious. I mean, we look at it all the time and we kind of recognize that birds live in trees and stuff, but my mind didn't take me to the place that, well, God made those trees for that purpose. It didn't just kind of happen. So that was kind of like a light bulb that didn't seem like it should have been on already, but it was kind of a new idea for some reason. And the other was that when time ends, that stuff, I still struggle with that. The idea, it takes me back to the old notion that we rejected, and I rejected a long time ago, of a punishing God that's going to burn up the people that are bad and take good care of the people that are good. So I don't quite get. I know, Minister, you did an awesome job in breaking all that stuff down. I mean, I had to really hold my head steady to keep from getting lost. I mean, I really, and I could follow pretty much what you were saying, but when you got to that part and it looked like you kind of rationalized it somehow, I don't know. It just seemed like that's not what that says. That says that, that God is going to direct the angels to take care of these evil people. And I thought that was not supposed to be what God was doing or intending to do, because then it means that if you don't follow the word, like someone might interpret it, means that you're going to be on the evil side and you're going to burn in hell, like people tell us all the time. I mean, so that with that parable, I don't quite get what that's doing there. Let me just put it that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Deacon Lynn or Reverend Janet?
No, nothing else.
Okay, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Trustee Marlene, I hear you. And when you say, like you kind of wonder what that's doing there, that's a good question. That's a good question to ask. And, even the writer, Matthew, who really wants people to understand that there will be some type of balance and repercussion. I think that he has Jesus, the writer has Jesus speaking in parables and say that they're parables to let us know that this is really symbolic. This is really metaphorical. This is not literal, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to take them literally, but
Yeah,
even Jesus said they were not literal. And Jesus talks about studying, right? And understanding through studying, right? Which prompts not only them, but us to remember the value of studying and digging a little deeper. Mm-hmm. Also, in the Old Testament, because this is not the only place where the gnashing of teeth comes in. When the language is used, the clenching and gnashing of teeth, it's talking about someone being extremely angry. It's usually talking about some person who is upset about something, that this has gotten them so upset that they're gnashing their teeth. And that is not what our interpretations sometimes have done with the New Testament reference, right? So we have to think about that, even when we think about how that reference has really become interpreted as something that is eschatological, that is about the end of times, right? Minister Gladys on Sunday talked about Jesus's references here to heaven on earth,
right.
And finding a way to distinguish between that which does not give us heaven on earth and that which does, which is how she went into the 4 agreements by
Right.
Miguel Don Luis, right? Ruiz.
Mhm.
So if we think about it symbolically, and Minister Cole really did work with metaphysical symbolism to help us to interpret that passage in a new and enlightened way. I think you're right. I think he did gloss over that one, but he was honest about it. He said, I don't like to,
He said, yeah, he did.
I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. He said, I don't like this, but I'm gonna tell you this.
So it may be worth a study individually to look at some more progressive interpretations of that,
Uh-huh.
so that we can shift from a literal interpretation of a metaphor, right?
Right. That would be
Of a
helpful.
simile,
Yeah.
and also that we really kind of try to see it in a way that doesn't place it in the traditional concept of hell and heaven. Right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I think that we can also think about, as Minister Cole said, that the people of the time would have understood. They would have understood that process of
Mhm.
separating the wheat from the tares, right? Separating the good from the bad, right? They would have understood that differently from the way that we understand it, because we don't live in an agrarian culture. At least I don't think that you live in an agrarian culture, right? Maybe some who are watching may say, oh, well, I live on a farm and I
Some
understand it,
things.
right?
Yeah.
But for many of us today, it's not our everyday experience. So we don't quite associate it with that. But if you lived on a farm and you did the work of separating, the wheat from the tares, or you did the job of separating the weeds from the flowers, right? And then you take the weeds and you just discard them or burn them in those days, then you would understand that differently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I see that.
But we have taken that interpretation and associated it with other interpretations of heaven and hell to believe that, oh boy, now even Jesus is talking about
right. That's how I was
and there be national. No, you'll be angry, right? You'll be angry.
Yeah.
Those things that you thought were
Put this in
valuable
here.
are actually not as valuable as you intended. Right? So
Mhm.
good
Thank you.
lesson, good class, Minister Cole. It's always important that you give us something to think about and give us something to take away. And you gave us a lot to think about. We'll be
Yeah.
thinking about this for a little while. We will,
Mhm.
because we still have questions based on the various perspectives that you gave us to look at this passage. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Excellent
Back
job.
over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, family. Well, I'm just going to say goodnight to my audience virtually and